The Anderson mansion hadn't slept in 183 nights. In a house where money could summon experts the way the tide summons gulls, silence was the one thing that kept refusing to come. Then, at 307 a.m., a hush spread across the nursery like a benediction, the kind that makes a grown man cry in the dark and thank a God he's not sure he believes in anymore. The hush had a name. Before we begin, if this kind of story speaks to your heart, feel free to share where you're watching from. It's always beautiful to see how far stories like this can travel. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1, the sound that wouldn't yield. The Anderson estate looked out over the Pacific, as if daring it to try anything. Limestone and glass, palisades and private shoreline, gardens sculpted to appear imperfect in ways that cost obscene amounts of money, every inch of it said permanence. But for 6 months, permanence had meant only one thing: 6 babies who would not sleep. In the nursery, Isabella designed before she died, soft dove walls, linen drapes flooded with ocean light, 6 cedar cribs bowed like tiny boats. The crying never stopped, only changed tones. The sextuplets, Olivia, Jack, Ava, Noah, girl Isabella, and Mason, had been born on a night that stole and gave at the same time. They arrived early, small as birds, their mother fading out of the world as their cries rushed into it. Liam Anderson had felt something tear that had nothing to do with his body, and the wound would not heal. By day, an army marched through the house: pediatric specialists, lactation consultants, sleep coaches, a craniosacral therapist with hands like air. By night, nurses in navy scrubs dozed in chairs and woke to crying, a metronome of need that made the plaster sweat. Liam paid invoices that would make a senator dizzy and walked the halls like a man whose past had turned to salt behind him. He was 35, a billionaire who turned companies with the same efficiency he turned pages. He had never met a negotiation he couldn't read in the first 3 seconds until he met grief. In the boardroom, they called him Winter because he could freeze a bad idea just by looking at it. In the nursery, his eyes had gone dull. He volume-limited his phone, wore cotton T-shirts he didn't remember owning, had forgotten what his own voice sounded like when it wasn't apologizing to a baby who couldn't yet understand language. Elena Davies, Elena with the clipped consonants and the spine that had never met a slouch, it didn't correct, ran the household. She ran it like an orchestra, tight, impeccable, unforgiving. She had been there before Isabella, before the sextuplets, before the bottomless tax breaks and the ruthless acquisitions, when the house had belonged to Liam's father, a man who mistook silence for affection. If you asked Elena, the house had never quite forgiven Liam for replacing its old ghosts with new ones. On the 183rd night, Liam rose from his chair when the clock slid past 3. He could navigate the nursery with his eyes closed by then, 3 steps to the left to avoid the rocking horse, 4 to the right to pass the twins' humidifier, 2 more to the big bed he had installed because someone told him proximity might help the baby soothe. Their mother had known every finger curve of this room, he knew only its shadows. He reached the doorway and stopped. The sound in the room was not crying, not anymore. It was something round, soft, a little miraculous, the fragile percussion of 6 babies breathing. On the center of that oversized bed lay a young woman he did not recognize. She had fallen asleep fully clothed, one hand splayed open, palm up, as if even in sleep she was still offering. Around her like petals after a storm, his children slept. Olivia's curls, Isabella's exact copper gold, spilled across the woman's forearm. Jack had tucked his cheek against her waist. Mason's foot rested on her thigh. Noah's open hand lay over the edge of her shirt, as if his body refused to release the anchor it had finally found. The nurse in the corner slept with her chin to her chest, soft snores betraying the surrender that comes only after vigilance and shame. In the bedside light, the woman's features were a series of quiet contradictions: full mouth, shaped by labor that wasn't hers, a broad nose that seemed to breathe both the salt of the sea and powdered milk, a halo of tight curls escaping the prison of a ponytail. She couldn't be more than 23. Liam stood perfectly still. He had never believed in miracles because he had always believed in schedules and plans. But there it was, the only evidence he had needed for 6 months, stretched out before him like some uninvited benediction. He didn't move for a long time. Then he did what men do when their entire system of control has been quietly undermined by a stranger. He memorized everything: the angle of her wrist, the exact shade of the lamp light, the fact that Olivia's tiny fist had ended up tucked beneath the woman's chin. He left the room with careful feet and the sudden, dangerous thought that he might be saved by something that couldn't be bought. Chapter 2, Protocols. By 8 o'clock, the glass hall outside the salon filled with staff. They stood in a tidy half-circle, the way people do when they both want to be seen and not chosen. Gardeners with soil still under their nails, drivers whose ties looked like promises, cleaners whose hands were red from the way wealthy people prefer their whites, everyone. "Last night," Liam started, and it cost him something to keep his voice even. There was a breach of protocol. Eyes drifted. You learn to read a room when people owe you their rent. He saw the quick glance from the head cook to Alina, the way the youngest maid stared at the floor as if the marble had finally become interesting. "You," Liam said, and felt the word pull toward the back of the group. The young woman with the halo of curls stepped forward, hands clasped in front of her, a uniform a size too big so it wouldn't ride up when she reached. "Name?" "Clara Williams, sir," she said. Her voice carried a warmth that made the light on the chandeliers seem ignorant. A black woman in a navy dress that did everything to hide her and failed. She lifted her chin because she had learned you can't let people keep it for you. "You're a housemaid," Liam said, because he didn't know what else to say. "You were hired to clean, not to—" He stopped himself before he said mother. "Not to be in the nursery," Alina finished for him, polite and clinical as a scalpel. "Miss Williams, I'm sure you meant well, but we have nurses who—" "They had stepped out," Clara said softly, eyes on Alina's collarbone, where the pearls sat like teeth. "Only for a moment. They asked me to watch." "The babies were," she exhaled. "They were so tired." "And you believed you could do better than trained professionals?" Liam said. The words came out colder than he intended. Sometimes the only way to control a fire is to throw a blanket over it, even if there's a sleeping baby underneath. Clara's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. "I believed I couldn't walk past a crying child," she said. "Sir." For a moment, pride and shame warred in Liam. He found himself hating that she called him sir. "Miss Williams," he said finally, and every person in that room waited for the sound of a life breaking. "Consider this a warning. Any further interference and you'll be thanked," he almost said, absurdly, wildly, because he remembered the hush. What he said was, "Let go." "Yes, Mr. Anderson," Clara said. She had learned the trick long ago at St. Jude's on Compton Avenue, where the city's discarded children went to learn how to disappear. You hide the tremble in your voice under the respectful crispness of your consonants, and you walk back to work with your head up, because your head is the only thing you own outright. By noon, she was on her knees in a powder room the size of a dance studio, wiping a perfect circle around the base of a sink that cost more than the car she used to sleep in. People walked past the open door to watch the new girl try to make herself small again. A few looked sorry. More looked relieved. In houses like these, the hierarchy is a pyramid so tall that those on the bottom can only see the shoes of the person directly above them. Chapter 3, Fever. On the 4th night after the warning, a fever bloomed as if the heat had been waiting for permission. Jack's cry cut through the house with a note Liam hadn't heard before. Desperation sounds different when it's tiny. The night nurse's voice shook as she met him at the door. "He's burning. I called Dr. Miller, but he's stuck in ER consults." "Give him to me," Liam said, the words out of his mouth before he knew he trusted himself with them. Jack felt like a coal in his hands, a small furnace that wanted to be a boy. He walked with him because it helped him feel like he could move the fever that way. Clara appeared in the doorway with a set of towels she had been folding down the hall. She took one look at the child, and the towels slid to the floor with a sound like surrender. "May I?" she asked. Liam, a man men didn't interrupt during negotiations, handed his son to a maid without thinking. Clara gathered Jack into her arms like she knew which parts of him hurt. She cupped his warm scalp with one hand and pressed the other hand between his shoulder blades, a palm, a seal, a promise. Then she hummed. It wasn't words, not at first. It was a sound older than every person in this house, older even than the city that held it. The tune was All the Pretty Little Horses, the lullaby her Nana had sung in a shotgun house in Jackson when the summer heat pressed a palm over the city's mouth. But Clara sang it soft, the way you do when you're telling a secret you don't want anyone to hold against you. Hush-a-bye, don't you cry, go to sleepy, little baby, Jack screams unspooled, as if someone had found the loose thread and pulled. His fists unfurled. His breath synced to the rhythm of the song like a boat catching the same swell as the tide. One by one, the other baby's crying thinned, then folded itself into that same hush, as if the lullaby had laid a net over the room and gathered all their small storms at once. When Dr. Miller arrived, 60 minutes later with apology all over his scrubs, Jack was sleeping in Clara's arms, the fever down to something that felt human. "What did you dose him with, miss?" "Williams," Liam supplied, watching Clara like a man who had seen a blueprint for the first time. She sang. "Then he had what he needed," the doctor said, folding open his stethoscope. "Human contact is medicine we underrate because it doesn't fit on a prescription pad." He examined the sleeping boy and kept his voice low. "Mr. Anderson," he said, "they lost their mother the day they met the world. That kind of absence makes a room echo in ways you can't hear unless somebody sings through it. This is not a pathology to fix. It's a relationship to build." After he left, Liam stood for a long moment with his hands in his pockets and the ocean making its old noises against the cliff. "Where did you learn to sing like that?" he asked. Clara's eyes moved past him to the window, where the sky was the color of the inside of a storm. "At St. Jude's," she said. "We used to bring the little ones into the laundry room during thunder. Dryers sound like heartbeats if you sit close enough. We learned to turn machines into mothers." "Who taught you that song?" "My Nana," Clara said. Said her mother hummed it working kitchens on the Gulf. Said the words were a promise whispering through time. Promises help children sleep. He nodded like a man who'd just been told there was a remedy for a thing he'd spent his entire fortune failing to cure. "Stay," he said abruptly, and winced at how it sounded. "I mean, stay until he wakes." His words, once weapons, were suddenly unwieldy. "I can stay," Clara said, which was a small lie. She could stay because going had never made anyone love her. Chapter 4, Rituals. In the morning, he found her with a baby in a sling, moving slowly through the house to the rhythm of her own body. She had wrapped the fabric high, the way doulas do, the way women have done in markets and bus stations and kitchens for centuries. 6 cribs sat neatly in the nursery, but the house began to sleep only when they slept on someone, in someone, around someone who would not go away. "You calmed them," Liam said that afternoon, as if she had accomplished something impossible. He stood with the ocean at his back and the weight of it all in his voice. "They calmed each other," Clara said. "I just gave them permission." She adjusted the sling, the motion sure, the curve of it both practical and tender. "They like scent. It tells them they are safe," she said, almost to herself. "They like heartbeats. They like to be where the air is used." Used. "Already been in somebody else and come out okay," Clara said. "New air can be scary when you don't trust the world yet." He rubbed his forehead with his thumb and forefinger the way a person would if they were trying to massage a thought from their skull. "I want to," he stopped. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to hear it as a question, not an order." She nodded, and he could see the wariness under the calm, the old knowledge that questions from the powerful are often knives dressed as flowers. "We're hiring round-the-clock infant specialists," he said, "but none of them have done what you did. The babies, they respond to you. Would you consider—" He lifted his hands as if the shape of them could sculpt what he didn't know how to say. "Would you consider stepping into a temporary role coordinating their care at night? I'd increase your pay, we'd rework your responsibilities." It would be formal, transparent, you wouldn't report to me directly. You're my employer, she said, almost like she was reminding him. This matters, how it's done, people talk, people notice. People will notice the baby's sleeping, he said. I want it documented, I want to do this right. He looked at the framed photo on the console table without meaning to, Isabella laughing with her head tipped back, hand on the curve of 6 in her belly. And I want to honor her, not replace her, not with you, not with anyone. Clara followed the line of his gaze and nodded. Then we start with rituals, she said. Babies need ritual more than they need rooms. A bedtime sequence, a scent they can recognize, a rhythm they can trust, he nodded. Tell me what to buy. Permission, she said simply. And time. He smiled at that, a small, unfurnished thing that made his face look like it remembered joy. Those are 2 things I haven't been able to purchase, he said, but I can try to make them. By evening, the job was formal. Human Resources drafted a contract that put Clara under the pediatric nurse practitioner on retainer, not under Liam. Her hours and pay were explicit. Her job description was precise. An attorney reviewed it. Ethics matter when power does. Elena read the contract with lips that left a thin pink line on the rim of her teacup. We are a family, not a daycare, she said, as if the words could burn the paper through. Your wife. My wife is dead, Liam said without flinching, and for just a second, something raw flashed across Elena's face. Not malice, not yet, a grief that had calcified into something useful. I know, she said. I was the one who held her hand when the epidural failed, the one who called your mother. The one who, she stopped and set her cup down. Its saucer was the only thing that caught it. If you must do this, do it properly. Chain of command, boundaries, there will be no confusion, Clara nodded. I am here for the children, Mrs. Davies. Elena looked at her long, and in that look was more than disdain. There was a frantic assessment, the way someone looks at a fire they weren't ready for. We'll see, she said. Chapter 5, the mother scarf. The thing that changed everything wasn't a lullaby or a contract or even a long night finally cut short. It was a scarf. Clara was cataloguing the nursery because details are love, and on the top shelf of the armoire she found a box made of cedar. Inside, wrapped in tissue so delicate it felt like breath, lay a silk scarf the color of quince blossoms. It smelled faintly of a perfume that had the same expensive absence as the house, a smell like white flowers that never die and wood that's been polished so many times it no longer remembers where it came from. She lifted it like it had a small heart in it. The babies reached for it as if they were birds, and this was the first tree they had ever seen. May I? She asked the room. May you what? Elena asked from the doorway where she had appeared without sound, because that is how some women survive. Use it, Clara said, tucked into their blankets for scent, not to replace anything, just to remind. Elena's mouth tightened. Miss Williams, we don't play with the dead. We don't, Clara agreed quietly, but they might play with us if we let them. Liam stood between them and felt the old world begin to argue with the one that had just arrived. He inhaled and smelled Isabella's perfume for the first time in months without wanting to run. Do it, he said. He looked at Elena and spoke in his winter voice. Properly, with care. If it fails, we stop. If it helps, we keep going. Clara tied a strip of scarf to each crib rail like a prayer flag. The babies slept with their faces turned toward the fabric, like it contained a story they remembered better than language. That night, the house slept so hard the ocean had to raise its voice to be heard. Chapter 6. The brooch. It rained sideways the day something broke. Clara was cleaning Liam's bedroom because the afternoon housekeeper had called in sick, and Elena had assigned others to their stations with the ruthlessness of a general with a hole in the line. On the dresser sat a brooch, a rectangle of sapphire surrounded by diamonds, the kind of thing that could make a weekday feel like an alibi. Isabella had worn it once, in Rome, on a white dress with a neck so clean it might have been a vow. Liam had kissed that brooch once, on his wife's collarbone, and the memory had been trying to kill him ever since. Clara moved carefully around it. She had a body that had learned to apologize for entering rooms, a way of making herself take up less space without physically shrinking. Still, the sleeve of her uniform brushed the corner, and the brooch slid fast, faster than a person can regret. It hit the floor with a sound that made her bones feel hollow. One tiny diamond, just one, shot under the bed and hid in the gathering dust like a sin. She sank to her knees, fingers sweeping the floor with the kind of panic that makes patterns skip. A small sound escaped her, something between a prayer and the way a person says no to a closed door. "My God," Elena said from the threshold with the false shock of someone who has been rehearsing their lines. "What have you?" "It was an accident," Clara blurted. "I was careful, I swear it. I'll pay for the repair, work for free until—" "You can't repair memory," Elena said coldly and raised her voice. "Mr. Anderson." He came fast because he was always ready to run when something broke. He took in the scene in a single second, Clara on her knees, a piece of his past in her hand, Elena's face set like a courtroom. "It was an accident," Clara said, "because sometimes truth is all you have left to offer." "I should have asked someone else to." "Let me see it," Liam said. He held the brooch like you hold the thing that can hurt you the most. The damage was small. The symbolic calculation was not. He inhaled, but this time he didn't say what men say when they want to erase the person in front of them to make room for their anger. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Clara looked up, startled. "No," he nodded. "Then we'll have it repaired by the jeweler who did the setting in the first place," he said, "and we'll lock it properly when not in use." Elena's eyebrows shot up. "You cannot be serious." "I am done punishing the living for being clumsy around the dead," he said, and if the sentence surprised him, it didn't show. After he left, Elena's composure cracked into something more dangerous. "This isn't over," she whispered as she leaned in, breath like tea going cold. "Girls like you come into houses like this to take. You sing, and people stop hearing their better judgment." Clara stood slowly, a new steadiness in her spine. "Girls like me work," she said simply. "That's all we have time for." Chapter 7, The Ethics of Love. If you ask people about danger, they'll tell you about knives and shadows and men behind you at night. If you ask those same people about the most dangerous kindness they've ever received, the stories will always involve someone finally seeing them. Liam started to see Clara, not as savior or threat or inconvenience, but as a person who had learned to carry other people's need without breaking her own back. He saw the way her eyes scanned the room before she left it, to make sure everyone had water, that the blanket edge covered the baby's feet, that the light hit the mobile the way it needed to make Noah laugh. He saw her read a line of poetry in the sunroom while the babies napped, lips moving because sometimes when you grow up without lullabies, you teach yourself with other people's words. One late afternoon, the house had reached that golden hour when even rich places look like they were built for regular people. Liam found Clara in the sunroom with a tattered anthology open in her lap. "Elizabeth Barrett Browning," he said, a smile bending the sentence. Her cheeks warmed. "Only the famous one," she said, half laughing. "It's like listening to someone count slow enough to make love sound like math." "How do I love thee?" he murmured, and for a moment Isabella's memory sat down beside them, not as a ghost, but as someone blessing the room. Clara closed the book. "It's not appropriate," she said quickly, and Liam heard all the other things she meant, the word employer like a chain, power imbalance like a room with one chair in it. "You're right," he said, and meant it. "The power dynamic here is a cliff." He took a breath. "I have spoken to HR. If our connection becomes anything more than a working relationship, you can't work for me, not in my house, not even through a third party. It won't be murky." Clara's fingers softened on the book's spine. This wasn't what she had expected. She had expected secrecy, risk, the kind of danger that makes a woman choose between hunger and mortgage. She had not expected a man to build a runway before he asked her to fly. "Thank you," she said simply. "God," he breathed out, and the laugh in the word sounded like relief. "Do you have any idea what it does to a man like me to want something he can't buy, to have to ask for it like a human being?" She looked up at him, meeting his candor with her own. Do you know what it does to a woman like me to even consider saying yes? Chapter 8. The music box. The music box wasn't hidden, which is how you hide things from grief. It sat on the top shelf of the nursery armoire with a small velvet ribbon around it, a keepsake they didn't use because it didn't know how to be useful. Ava discovered it because she discovered everything on her elbows, determined to make a map of every inch of this room with her body. Her hand reached, and the music box toppled, landing on the rug with a muffled thump. The lid popped open. A faint tinkling melody floated out, tinny tender, the first bars of All the Pretty Little Horses. Clara's hands went still over the basket of clean onesies. She had heard 100 versions of that song in 100 rooms, but not from this box, in this house, under this ocean. She lifted it and felt something catch beneath the velvet. A folded envelope, cream paper gone soft with time, had slipped loose. For Liam, the front read, in Isabella's hand. Clara stared at it for 3 seconds that felt like trespass, and then carried it to Liam like you carry a lit candle through wind. He took the letter with fingers that had known her handwriting as intimately as they knew his own. He sat on the edge of the big bed before he could go down with it. Clara stepped back. This was a private river he needed to walk into himself. He slit the envelope with the care of a man splitting an artery back open. Inside was a single page. If I don't make it, it began without any cruelty to the sentence. Then I need you to listen to me with all the parts of your heart that aren't terrified. I wanted to fill that house with laughter so loud the Pacific would have to raise its voice. We were going to be ridiculous parents, remember? But in case I don't get to be there, promise me you won't turn our home into a mausoleum. Promise me you won't let love be something you walk around to avoid waking it up. If someone comes who brings music back, let her into the house and into the nursery and into your life as far as she's willing to go. I don't mean a social equal. I don't mean a woman anyone else would choose for you. I mean the woman whose voice makes our children feel held by something that isn't going to leave. There's a girl you'll never guess I met while I was pregnant. St. Jude's, on Compton. I brought blankets and left thinking I'd given a gift until I heard her humming in the laundry room during a storm. It was the only time in the 3rd trimester that all 6 stopped moving at once, like they were listening. I stood and cried alone in an orange hallway because sometimes gratitude is too heavy to carry anywhere. I didn't catch her name. Maybe you never will either. Let the music in, Liam. Let love in wherever it comes from. He read it twice, then a 3rd time. The sound that came out of him after the 2nd reading was not a sound his children had heard before. Clara stood very still and then did the only thing that made sense. She put the box back on the top shelf with the ribbon tied the way it had been so the universe could pretend it had not looked directly at them, and said yes. Chapter 9. The performance. You can invite rest into a house one lullaby at a time. You can also invite the world. The Newport Elementary fundraiser invited local families to share holiday songs. The head of the PTA was a woman whose Instagram account had become a catalogue of joy, and when she saw a video of Clara singing while Olivia fell asleep in under 30 seconds, she messaged Liam, "Would you bring the babies?" Would she be willing to sing for the other new parents? Some night nurses from the NICU were coming. It would mean the world. Elena cleaned coffee cups that afternoon with the force of a complaint. "It would be inappropriate," she said. "We do not display the children like items on a tasting menu." "They are not display," Liam said. "They might be medicine for someone else, the way this has been medicine for us." "We are private," Elena insisted. "People will talk about her, about you." "They already do," he said, and in the way he said it was the first hint of contempt for the opinions of people he'd paid to keep happy. He asked Clara gently, in the small kitchen where the staff's food tasted more like food. "If you're comfortable," he said, "would you?" "I'll sing anywhere a tired heart needs it," she said, and meant it. "But I don't want to be a story people used to feel better about the wrong things." "What does that mean?" he asked. "I don't want to be a miracle maid," she said. "I'm a woman with a job who knows the science of softness. If people can hear that through whatever else they are hearing, I'll sing." They went. Clara stood at the front of a school auditorium and watched 27 exhausted parents exhale at exactly the same time. She sang the song of carousels and horses and a world that kept going even when your mother didn't. The babies fell asleep in their stroller with the kind of synchronized quiet that makes strangers cry. The NICU nurses waved from the second row. The head of the PTA posted a 20-second clip. 1 million people watched it by noon the next day. The comments swung between rapture and suspicion, this country's twin religions. She's an angel, she's after his money, look at the way those babies trust her. Of course he falls for the help, that voice, that power imbalance. Elena printed the worst ones and placed them face up on the kitchen island like evidence. Clara picked them up one by one and set them in the recycle bin. Trash belongs where trash goes, she said. Chapter 10, The Storm. The power went out on a night when the sky looked like the inside of a bruise. The generator kicked in, but not before the babies woke to the sudden absence of noise. Machines off, fridge quiet, the house finally honest about how much it had relied on hum. Their cries rose like alarm. "Everyone into the nursery," Clara said, voice calm, "and if you'd never grown up with chaos, you might not have recognized command." She lit the battery candles. She sent one nurse to warm towels in the dryer. "Heartbeats," she said. "We're going to be heartbeats." She put on the white noise app on her phone and tucked it under the mattress. "Swaddle," she instructed, "but not too tight. Bundle them but leave room for their anger. Rock side to side, not front to back. Front to back feels like falling." Liam watched the orchestra form, 10 hands making a simple song. His hands remembered how to do what they'd done for weeks. Hold, hum, bend. He looked at Clara, who stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the room the way a captain takes in weather. "You've done this before," he said, and saw the way her mouth softened. "All storms feel the same in your chest," she said. "You just decide whether you're the house or the ocean." "What are you?" he asked. "Today," she said, and the smallest grin cut her seriousness in two. "The house." By the time the generator steadied and the lights rose, 6 babies slept, and for the first time in months, Liam and Clara realized they were standing close enough to count one another's inhale. They didn't kiss, not that night. They sat on the floor beside the big bed with the sound machine hissing like rain and talked about nothing until nothing felt like the most important thing. When he walked her to the staff wing, he didn't touch her. He said, "I want to know you outside this house." She angled her head. "Then don't be my employer." The next morning, he restructured her contract. By evening, she was no longer on his payroll. A cooperative agency specializing in postpartum care handled her hours, pay, and oversight. He contributed to a foundation, but his hands were out of the day-to-day. She reported to the agency. She said yes to a lot of what they offered and no to 3 things that made her feel used. Power began to look less like a cliff and more like a set of handrails. Chapter 11, The File. When you take away a person's unspoken position, they will either become themselves or their worst story. Elena brought a dossier to Liam's office at noon on a Wednesday and placed it on his desk with the dignity of a judge passing a sentence he didn't agree with but would carry out anyway. "I need you to see this," she said. Her voice was steady, which is always the first warning. He opened the file. There were 3 references from previous houses, thin, terse lines about boundaries and termination without cause. A photocopied page from a decades-old report at St. Jude's, no letterhead, no signature. Removed at 16, it said. Interpersonal concerns. It said nothing else. That's the thing about paper, it can make emptiness look official. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "I protect this house," she said. It sounded like "I do what I have to." He sat back so slowly the leather didn't even sigh. "Do you remember," he said, "the way you held Isabella's hand when she screamed, the way you told her she wasn't alone? That was the bravest thing I had ever seen until just now, when I realized the person who did that had convinced herself that punishing the living is a way to honor the dead." Elena blinked as if dust had entered the room. "You're blinded by love," he said evenly. "Yes, also by evidence. I've watched her work, I've watched her care. Show me more than rumor and I will look." Show me truth that hurts and I'll sit in the hurt. But this is you picking up stones because you can't stand that the music came from someone you didn't pick. He closed the file and pushed it back across the desk. You've run this house for 20 years, he said. It's time we formalize what ethical boundaries look like here. There will be no more end runs around HR, no more dossiers. If we assess any caregiver, we do it with them present, and we do it with the assumption that people are not guilty until the powerful get bored. That night, Elena sat at the kitchen table in the staff wing and stared at a mug she did not drink. She had loved this house so long she had started to believe it would love her back. She had been 28 when she took the job, with a baby in a photograph she kept in her wallet and never showed anyone. That baby had grown and died before he could live, and nobody knew. Loyalty can look like a virtue until you find out it was a bargain you made with loneliness. Chapter 12, The Leaving. When Elena left, she did it with an overnight bag and the dignity of someone who'd always left first. Liam didn't fire her. She resigned and left a letter in an envelope turned face down. He read it at the kitchen island so the room would witness it. I thought I was protecting this house, it said. I see now I was protecting myself. Forgive me for confusing the two. On the way out, she paused in the nursery. Clara stood at the window with Olivia on her hip, looking out at a line of pelicans flying so low over the water they looked like the idea of grace. Elena spoke without bitterness, which is what happens when a person finally realizes the story they were telling themselves had an end. They sleep with you, she said. It wasn't a question. They sleep because the house finally does, Clara said quietly. Elena nodded. It was never the children who were keeping us awake, she said, and was gone. Chapter 13, Harbour and Hush. By spring, the estate had learned a new rhythm. Mornings smelled like coffee and salt and clean baby. Afternoons smelled like grass and sunscreen and the light, warm scent of a nap gone to its knees. Nights smelled like lavender and something invisible that everyone recognized, safety. Clara moved into a small cottage a block from the estate with a window that faced east so she could watch the night give itself back to the morning. She had enrolled in a certificate program in infant mental health on a full scholarship from an anonymous donor whose checks arrived in white envelopes. She called the program She Dreamed Up Harbour and Hush and began teaching free classes for new parents at the community centre off Superior. Liam sat in the back row sometimes, cap pulled low, and learned about the 5 esquotes like everyone else. He kept his hands to himself because the most radical thing a man can do is not touch what he wants. They waited. Waiting was the new miracle. On a June morning that looked like a hymn, Liam walked with Clara down to the private strand. The babies had learned to crawl toward waves. They spread a blanket. Olivia found a shell with a hole through it and grinned like she'd found a door. I loved her, Liam said, because naming the past is the only way to invite a future. Isabella, I'll love her as long as there's a Pacific. That won't change. I know, Clara said. It wasn't an absolution. It was an acceptance. And I love you, he said. Not because you fixed my house. Because it turned out you were quiet in all the places where the world is loud. Because you are not afraid to tell me the truths I don't want to pay for. Because you built a way for my children to feel safe that didn't require anyone to disappear. Clara looked at the line where the sky met the water and wondered if the horizon ever got tired of pretending to be two things at once. I love you, she said, but I love me too. So we do this slow, with care like sleep training for grown-ups. He laughed, and the sound startled a gull into flight. Deal, he said. I even like the idea of earned rest. They told the babies without words, because babies don't keep your secrets, but they do keep your truths. Olivia pulled herself up on Clara's knee and rested her head there. Mason fell asleep with the heel of his hand on Liam's shin. Girl Isabella, a name that both healed and ached, watched the waves with an intensity that made everyone think she remembered something from before she was born. When the light turned the water to coins, when the baby's breathing synced to the tide, when the house on the bluff behind them exhaled like a person who finally knew how, Liam handed Clara a small box. It's not a ring, he said quickly. eyes bright with a boy he hadn't been for a long time. "It's for your work, for Harbour and Hush." Inside lay a brass key attached to a tag stamped with an address on 17th Street, a storefront with dusty windows and a counter that hadn't touched a dream in years. "It's yours," he said. "The lease, the build-out, yours, no strings. We can sign the anonymous donor name on the check until the end of the world if that's what keeps it clean. Just make a place where tired people can go to learn how to rest." Clara closed her fingers around the key. It was heavier than it looked, which is true of anything that opens something that matters. "Okay," she whispered. "It wasn't gratitude. It was assent. They didn't marry that year. They didn't need to. They chose family every day with the ordinary courage of breakfast and bath time and 1,000 small rituals that mean everything. When they finally did stand up in a room and promise each other something, it was under the pergola Isabella's bougainvillea had finally decided to climb. The guest list was small. Elena sent flowers. Nobody was forgiven. Everyone went softer. On the first night in months that nobody woke in the house, not baby, not father, not the woman who had finally given herself permission to stay, the ocean sent up a sound so exquisite it felt like applause. And if you stood outside the nursery door at 307 a.m., you could hear it, 6 children breathing like someone had written their names inside the walls. Someone had, the woman whose voice had threaded a path through the grief and handed it back to the living. Sometimes the miracle is not that the crying stops. Sometimes the miracle is that someone lays down with you in the dark and hums until you remember how to be held by a world that has hurt you and will hurt you again. Sometimes the miracle is the hush. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a little hush tonight and let me know where you're watching from. It's a beautiful thing to see how far a lullaby can travel.